Big ideas in small bites. This is Bite Sized, brought to you by Accenture.
Welcome to Bite Sized. Generative AI is the technology on everybody's lips. At its best, it could be capable of driving unprecedented productivity and growth for people and across business. It has the scope to change employment either through making routine tasks much easier to complete or by transforming the nature of work entirely. But what does this mean for people who are not in employment or who have limited access to technology? Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Serena Baines, the CEO of Movement to Work, and Charles Eales, AI National Skilling Director at Microsoft UK. And they are with me today to discuss the untapped potential of AI for unemployed young people across the UK and how we might use technology to level the playing field for all. So Serena, Movement to Work has helped to deliver an impressive 200,000 youth opportunities across the UK. But in this age of generative AI, when the tech is evolving faster than ever before, young people who are not in education, employment or training, NEET, they're at risk of being left behind. So can you share with us, please, some of the challenges that they face in accessing this technology compared to their peers?
So Movement to Work is an employer-led youth employment charity, and our mission is to break the no experience, no job cycle that traps so many young people starting out in their careers, with a special focus on those who are NEET. I think from our perspective, we're really keen to hear the lived experiences of young people, so we visited youth hubs across the country to really gather their perspectives, experiences on the challenges they're facing, and then also their experiences of Gen AI as well and how they're using that today. And our research aimed to answer two key questions, really. Firstly, the current landscape. So what are the challenges young people are facing in accessing the job market? And then what is their kind of use and views of Gen AI today? However, as with all research, it's not that straightforward. And what we found is that whilst there is so much potential and NEET young people can harness this technology, most NEET young people, whilst they're aware of Gen AI, at least half of them haven't even used the tech today. And then when it comes to actually supporting them with their job search applications, only 14.5% have used the technology for that kind of use case. And that's primarily due to two key reasons. One, a lack of understanding of how to use the tech and how to use the tech responsibly. And then secondly, fears around employers actually penalising them for doing so.
It is really exciting research. And I love that as a charity, you are looking not just at the impact of generative AI on the nature of work and the digital skills that people will need, but more broadly, how can it be leveraged as an unlock so it can give people greater access to work opportunities? So if we think about that in a bit more detail, how can we level the playing field?
If we are to level the playing field, we need to bridge this gap. We need to bridge this gap and ensure NEET young people aren't left behind. We need to equip them with the knowledge, skills and confidence to really harness Gen AI and allow them to ultimately navigate the job market as best as possible and then succeed in the world of work. And I think, after all, right, our research tells us that Gen AI has the potential to be a great leveler for NEET young people. We just need to unlock it. And since the launch of our research earlier this year, we've been embarking on our Gen AI youth engagement plan. So working with Accenture, Microsoft and the DWP, we've been visiting youth hubs across the country from Barking to Blackpool and ultimately using this as an opportunity to educate young people on the responsible use of Gen AI and how they can use it to support them to not only get into work, but ultimately be successful once they're in work as well.
Charles, it would be great to hear from you here. What's your perspective on this? Microsoft, clearly a major technology employer in the UK, but you must really see this up close in your role as skilling director.
There is a really critical need in society to sort of make sure that everybody has a basic understanding of what generative AI is, some basic sort of skills to enable them both to participate but also to shape the new AI economy. And as Microsoft in November 2023, we made a commitment to the UK of £2.5 billion, which was both in terms of AI infrastructure, but also about how we could help skill people up. So we committed to skilling 1 million people on AI by the end of 2025. And that's part of the reason for our great partnership with Serena and Movement to Work and Accenture that we're so delighted about. And I totally agree with everything that Serena talked about in terms of sort of like levelling the gap and how do we bridge that gap as well. So I think there's a great opportunity here if we can sort of skill up neat young people to have the skills that's required, that employers like Microsoft, like Accenture, are looking for that diverse and inclusive young talent. And we could risk forgoing the skills, the ingenuity and the perspectives of neat young people if we don't support them and we fail to bridge this gap.
And I think we are seeing more effective and impactful partnerships forming all the time, a little bit like this one. But let's zoom in on the technology for a moment, if we can. What do you think is the role of generative AI in particular as a technology in supporting neat young people into employment?
I think the first aspect I'd be thinking about is around careers advice. We know that many neat young people don't have the ready access to good careers advice or to experts to help them in terms of understanding about the world of work. One of our partners on the project, Get My First Job Talent People, did some research where they actually looked at what was the primary source of information, careers information for a young person. It was the internet. And that's interesting because I think we all know there's lots and lots of sort of like great information sort of like on the internet, but it's not curated. And the research also showed that people who were disadvantaged struggled more to actually understand sort of like what was the good and what was the bad information. And there was more opportunity for misinformation and being misled as well. And we actually worked with the talent people then to come up with a careers co-pilot, with the idea being how can we utilise AI to help young people wherever they are in the country to be able to get good quality careers advice. And it's a AI-powered chatbot that speaks to young people in a natural language interface using a persona of a young person. So hopefully the responses they get are very much in keeping with how they would talk themselves. But it's using curated information, so it's using trusted sources to actually be able to provide sort of tailored information based on what we know about the young person, where they live, what sort of skills, etc. they've got as well. A great use of AI to improve that whole career service, make it available to every sort of like neat young person across the country. And then the research also showed some more practical examples of sort of when somebody is looking to seek employment, which goes all the way from number one, how do you find a job, to actually how can you sort of like utilise sort of like AI and utilise prompting to be able to find specific jobs in an area with your sort of skills that you could then apply for. The second one, which is the one I think gets talked about quite a lot, is how does it help you in terms of creating content? So that could be drafting an application, it could be a cover letter, it could be how do you sort of like create your CV. And I know it sometimes gets criticised, but I think actually when you think about sort of like the number of young people out there who maybe have conditions such as dyslexia, who maybe don't have English as their first language, or just have poor literacy levels. The third one is how it can help them to actually find out about companies, how it can find about roles. In the past, maybe that was quite difficult to get. I think now with AI, that's becoming much more interesting and available for anybody to be able to find out about a company, about their values, about their mission, about sort of like, what are their recent announcements, what changes have they been making, etc., and to be able to access and utilise that information. And then the final one is actually when it comes down to interviewing and how it can help you from an interview perspective. So whether that's using AI to think about what would be the questions that I could get asked in interviews that I can then prepare for, or whether it's what would the questions I should ask sort of like when I'm actually in the interview, and down to some of these AI interview tools like we have with LinkedIn, which will actually help when you're practicing to help you to understand whether you're speaking coherently, whether you're using filler words, whether you're keeping good eye contact, etc. as well.
You've obviously created a very powerful tool, and we'd expect nothing less of an organisation like Microsoft. Do you have any practical tips for other employers who might not be as far along their AI journey?
I think, personally, I always start with a view, which is any company that's recruiting is looking to find the best talent and the most diverse and inclusive talent. That's what they're sort of starting out to do. And therefore, what you've got to do is think about how do I actually create a process that is going to lead me to getting that talent. With young people within Microsoft, we recruit a number of apprentices each year, and that's probably the best example in terms of like where we've hopefully put some good practices together in terms of how we use AI and how that's really helped us to actually increase the sort of like diversity that we get through our apprenticeship program. So the number one thing is to start off with what's that clear policy on the use of AI. So being really specific about what is it that you can use AI for. So that's like the preparation in terms of sort of like interview support. What is it not allowed to be used for. One we found is actually during interviews. So over time, we've noticed that sort of like more and more candidates actually have sort of like AI prompted notes that they refer to when they're doing an interview. And as you probably know, Emma, that sort of like the keeping eye contact and having engagement and being authentic are critical things that you need to be doing when you're actually having an interview. And if you don't, it's going to disadvantage you. And then the third one is around how do we give everybody the greatest opportunity to be successful in the process? And what we mean by that is, how do we create a process that allows everybody to shine? I think the last thing I'd sort of say is, in the future, I really hope we're going to be able to use AI more to provide candidates with more detailed feedback in terms of how they've done in the process, to enable them to learn and get something back to help them with sort of future applications. Again, from the research, it was really clear that sort of like there was one of the big concerns that young people had was when they get no response, or they actually just get a response that says no, it doesn't help them at all. And once you get that on multiple occasions, it becomes very demotivating, even down to affecting a young person's sort of mental health. So I really hope that sort of like the AI is not just going to be used by the candidates, but it's also going to be used by the employers to make the process a better process.
So, Charles, how can we ensure that young people who are NEET also have the skills and the tools that they need to succeed throughout their careers in a tech-powered workplace, not just to get through the application process?
Yeah, great question, Emma. Number one is we need to make sure that sort of like that everybody has access to really good, free and high quality skills training. We have created an AI sort of skills navigator. It's a one-stop shop where anybody can go to get free online AI sort of skilling from Microsoft Learn, from LinkedIn Learning, and that's going to be something that we're going to be really promoting and want to make sure that everybody has access to. We've worked very closely with Movement to Work again to make sure that sort of like for our partnership with them, both Microsoft learning materials are available there, but also from other organisations, including the great learning materials from Accenture as well. So I think that's number one, is actually how do we make sure that regardless of whether your employer is giving you sort of like good skilling, that you can always find it yourself in terms of sort of getting sort of skilled up. The second, I think, is we really need to make sure we're inspiring young people. I think that's what we need to do, is show people that actually anything is possible. So whether it's you struggle to get your first job, whether it's or you come from a part of the country which is quite deprived, you can succeed and you can get into really good jobs as well. I think the last thing I'd sort of say is probably more around a mindset culture, which is, I think we're not just young people, but I think all of us are going to have to get used to the concept of reskilling, and that skills are going to change.
There's no doubt AI, and generative AI in particular, presents a huge learning challenge and opportunity for all of us, regardless of our age and background. Serena, coming to you finally, can you talk a little bit about how we help young people to succeed throughout their careers, but also how are you scaling the impact of Movement to Work through your youth hubs?
So there's kind of two key initiatives with this. One being a social media outreach, so Instagram, TikTok, whatever it may be, really kind of honing in on the use cases for Gen AI and how it can support young people to get into work, but also whilst they're in work as well. And then the other being our youth engagement plan and how we're going into youth hubs across the country. And what we're really doing is teaching young people about the responsible use of Gen AI and how they can use it to support them into work and beyond. So whether that's crafting better applications, preparing for interviews, identifying transferable skills, or really kind of building confidence in that potential that we know they have. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And I think we know we need to go that one step further. So what we're also doing as well, and we've got some sessions all around, how do we ensure that we're not just supporting young people, but we're also inspiring, educating and upskilling youth-facing workers and youth coaches across the country to ensure that they can pay it forward and they can support young people on an ongoing basis. And I think what we've really found with a lot of this is that we need to ensure that young people know that Gen AI is there to kind of multiply that human potential. It's not there to replace it. And one of our youth ambassadors put it really nicely when they kind of said to us, if you're using Gen AI to replace you, you're using it wrong. But if you're using Gen AI to enhance you, you're using it right. And I think for me, that says it all. That's the mindset we need all young people to adopt if they are truly going to thrive in this world of AI, and particularly to kind of get them into work and support them beyond that as well.
I love that. If you're using Gen AI to enhance you, you're using it right. What a brilliant quote for us to finish that part of our discussion. Thank you both. You've given me, and I'm sure all of our listeners, a lot of food for thought about generative AI, what it might mean for the future of work, and also the future of access to work. And what's great to hear is how that theoretical promise is being translated into practical action through partnership and regional impact as well, crucially. And so, to our final question, which we like to ask all of our guests, Serena and Charles, would you share with us, please, what is it that you're reading or listening to at the moment that's really inspiring you or giving you pause for thought?
So I've actually been spending some time starting to read Human and Machine. And I guess for me, that really kind of talks to where do we see AI going in the future, and that concept of ensuring that there's always human in the loop and it's all around augmentation, not replacement.
Brilliant. And a good example of how lots of the books that have been written about AI over recent years are proving to be incredibly relevant now as we start to see it go to scale. So a great recommendation. Charles, what about you?
In terms of what I'm reading at the moment, just one thing is a book by Jeffrey Ding, which is called The Rise and Fall of Technological Leadership, which is actually all about AI, but in the context of inventions and actually which are the countries that benefit. And it really, the crux of it is that it's not always the countries that actually invent technologies that are the ones that actually sort of like benefit the most from them. It's the countries that actually are able to diffuse the technology across the whole of society that are the ones that benefit. So it's really interesting in terms of how that might play out for sort of like for the UK and the broader world.
Thank you, Charles. We really look forward to seeing the impact of the work that you are all doing together in the youth hubs, how Gen AI can be put into practice to help us level up and ultimately to enable more social mobility across the UK. So a big thank you to both of you. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. This has been Bite Sized.